Okay, Brother Mark.
Well, thank you, Professor Kevin, for that. I really enjoyed that. Maybe somewhere down the line you could write maybe a book with all your word studies, or maybe a devotional with all your word studies. Because what I like about his Hebrew is he's to the point. And but yet there's a quickening. Mine, somebody asked me one day, it's not a big question, but what do you think about the law? I said, how much time do you have? We're going to spend the next 3 hours in Hebrew on this thing. So I always enjoy someone that can just have those nuggets. I want to talk to you, I'm going to get right into it, about 5 paradigm shifts of 2016. Now, this for me is personal, but if you can glean something from my journey, then it's all worth it. But there's 5 paradigm shifts that I'm going to talk about both tonight and in the morning. When I came to the Passover conference, I wanted to talk about the grace laws, which was 2 laws, which was the law of victims' rights. Okay, we have a little adjustment here. Oh, look at there. That thing's going to follow me around. I'll probably have to take it with me, you know that. So, so there were 2 laws there. That was the law of victims' rights and the law of double witness. And for me, the teaching on the law of victims' rights is what opened up a new understanding, or a shift in my understanding about law. And I said I was going to talk about mercy and time. I spoke more about mercy and time than I did the grace laws. But every speaker at the Passover conference imparted a dimension into me, and which has been characterized by 2 different things. One is absolute creativity, and the other has been absolute chaos. Can I get an amen? So when Dave Dixon said this morning that we are on the threshold of more than we have ever seen, and yes, as Diane said, are we there yet? I've asked that question many times. I went to sonship meetings where every meeting we'd get together, we'd share a new revelation. It was like a weekend conference. By Sunday, we were all depressed because we knew we were way far away from whatever we were looking for. And it become more important to celebrate where we come from, that we wasn't them, than where we were going. And before you know it, we were shouting because we wasn't them, but we had no idea where we were going. I mean, we wasn't even asking were we there yet, because we knew we were way far away from where we were, because we had no sense of where we were. I had meetings where we shouted that we didn't believe in the rapture, and we had no idea what there was, but we're just happy that it wasn't that. Now, I can't do this beautiful Hebrew language of candor. If I did, it'd sound like a yodel. But I remember growing up singing, I'll fly away, and we found out we wasn't flying away. We didn't know what else we were going to do, but we were sure happy we wasn't flying away. And so we would get in these meetings, and that Saturday morning, oh, hallelujah, I don't believe in this anymore, and I don't believe in that anymore. And now we got to preaching about it. And then in the afternoon, we get the new, deepest revelation. By Sunday, we were all depressed because we knew we were complete outcasts and had no idea where we were going. So that was where I was in sonship. And yet, in the midst of now, when I know we're on the brink of this thing, it is the greatest moments of creativity and the greatest moments of chaos at the same time. That's weird, isn't it? I mean, things that that had been prophesied over you, have been spoken over you, and you're right at that doorway, and at the same time, the craziest stuff that has ever happened to you, like I got in a hotel in Des Moines, Iowa. They were reconstructing the thing, right? So it had no elevator. We had to take the stairs. You know what I mean? And guess what? We reserved a bottom floor. Guess what they gave us? A top floor. I have a lot of books. So I had to take the books all the way up the stairs and all the way down. Worse than that, the remodeling. We got in there, we didn't even have a toilet seat. I said, Lord Jesus, what in the way? Lord. I would have rebuked the devil, but it wouldn't have done no good. So we're in the midst of this release of grace, this double portion of grace. When I was driving here on the way, I saw a Minnesota tag that had the Hebrew word, this word right here. And you see this? This is the way it's supposed to look, okay? This is the chicken scratch hillbilly of Mark Eaton right here. It actually had this word, which you know, when the translators, sometimes the Hebrew word with W, they would also sometimes spell it here. And this is what it said right here on the license plate, Tov, which is the 22 letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Oh, okay. Are you sure you want to do this? Because I have a Pentecostal background. You know what I'm saying? Man, I got a lasso and all that kind of stuff. No, I'm kidding. So I saw this word Tov, and here's the numbers that I had for it. The first license plate said 588. The second license plate said 876. And then I went into Eden Avenue. And then the rain came. So I said, okay, I don't know what this is, but that's the 22 letter of the Hebrew alphabet. I know there's a 5 in there. And then I come to the meeting, and y'all talking about double portion of grace. May I submit to you that we are in the midst of a grace revolution that has surpassed any revolution we've ever seen, but we're coming into a mercy revolution. And the mercy revolution is going to balance all the misbalances. Because now when people are in the beginning of a movement, and I know this for myself, I'll begin to discern something and then I'll jump the gun. And so what we try to preach is, well, it's grace versus law. No, if you really understand paradox, you know, I asked Stephen years ago, are you finished work? He said yes and no. That's paradox. But you see, the problem that most of us don't understand is this thing called time. So I was looking at the grace laws, the law of victims' rights. A few years ago, I was doing a study on contrast, and I decided to study the law. And on the way down to SMU Theological Library to study law, I found a newsletter of Stephen Jones called The Law of Victims' Rights. Opened up a whole new way of looking at things. So I got up, did a presentation. It was on a Friday night. I was the last speaker, just like here. It was at First Covenant, Dallas, Texas. And then after I got done, Stephen's like, well, this is what I was saying. And then he gave me Dr. Kenneth Bailey's book, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. He showed me the book. And Kenneth Bailey, who actually passed in May, has opened up a whole new world to me in how I look at parables and how I look at Greek and Hebrew. So all I had with me going to the Passover conference was the law of victims' rights and the law of double witness, which I know Rob Corey has spoke on much, and he continues to speak on it. And then he did a message connecting the law of double witness to fractals. I had never, ever heard the term fractal. So I text a friend of mine from Heber Springs, Arkansas. I said, what do you know about fractals? He sent me a piece. I said, that looks like a presentation. He said, it was. I took it out. I said, put it back in. And I discovered that scientists have only discovered in the last few years what ancient Hebrew has known all along, and that's that it is a pattern within a pattern. May I submit to you that when you are in your chaos, you may think God has forgotten you. You may think you have no idea what's going on. You may think this don't make sense. But even in chaotic weather, there's a perfect pattern. So I'm saying you tonight, dance with your chaos and find the pattern. Don't try to get out of your situation. Start dancing with your creativity and start dancing with your chaos. Because when we go through breakdown, there's always breakthrough. And there has been a revolution of grace, and I'm telling you, God is flooding this planet with his grace so that we can understand an understanding of what we're coming into, which is mercy. And mercy and chaos don't look like they're two subjects you could put in the same room. But if you really understand mercy from the Hebrew, you understand that what we have called chaos isn't the work of the devil, it's the work of God. Because chaos will position you to be where you could never be. I said a couple weeks ago, God, there are things that have to happen only you can do. And God said, I'm glad we got that straight. You know, I thought prayer was informing God. I used to do that a lot. He didn't know, so I told him. I spent about 3 hours telling God how bad I felt and how unworthy I was and how I confessed every sin I knew. Finally got things right, broke through, told God everything I knew, and then I ran out of time. I was done. I thought that was prayer. Went down the road, looked at a pretty woman, had to start all over. That's not prayer. Prayer is when you walk out of there with a revelation of God. I used to fast all the time, which maybe I should do that now, but I was just starving myself. I wasn't getting nothing done. Said, are you fasting? Oh, I'm fasting, brother. What for? I don't have a clue. Church said fast, so we're fasting. So then, fractals led us to chaos theory. Chaos theory led us to the study of chaos. And do you know, there's a big difference in Hebrew and Greek thought. The idea of chaos being a bad thing, you know who invented that? The Greeks did. Not the Hebrew, because God said everything that he created was good. That's including all of Genesis. And I've read all the books, you know, years ago I was charismatic. And man, I had a gap theory that had a lot of gap theories in it. You know what I'm saying? I could explain everything. Dinosaurs, Genesis, except for the fact that the God I served only won 99% of the world. 99% of the world was going to hell, and he only got one sheep out of the whole deal. And we called that victory. I got tired of shouting about all that stuff. So let's look at this word here, and I'm going to have to delete this beautiful Hebrew here. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I don't blame you. Hey, listen, you got the writer. He can put more up here. I might put Hebrew on here later and make him sing it. No, I'm just kidding. You have this word, and I think he used the word chesed. And there's different spellings. That is one of the Hebrew words for love. Now, many times you have a CH in your spelling, or you just have the word hesed. Now, this is the word translated as loving kindness. Now, I've done a lot of Greek studies on, my main thing, if y'all ain't figured this out by now, is I read a Greek New Testament, and I started studying Greek years ago. And what got me is that they teach you 4 years of Greek, and they'll give you basic Hebrew, and in many theological seminaries, they cancel the Hebrew. Now, how in the world am I going to understand the New Testament if I don't have Hebrew roots? Well, it's because most of our scholars don't know Hebrew, so they can't pull the Hebrew root through the Greek. But there's something I've been working on for a number of years Because how many of you know there are certain words that appear throughout the Bible many times? It's called semantic range. This word appears all through the Bible. And you have this word, it takes this word, agape, that's Greek, which means unconditional love or a love that's never been conditioned. You also have the word phileo, which is friend. You also have many words associated with that. But if that's the only sense of that word, that'd be different. But you also have, and I call this kind of my way of seeing double witness, is you also have this other dimension. By the way, another word that has to do with this is the word Hannah. Listen to this. This is a Hebrew word for grace. Man, somebody told me grace ain't in the Old Testament. I said, then you got the wrong Bible. Because the word here is the zeal and kindness of God that is towards you. I remember years ago I asked a Hebrew professor named Dr. Eddie Brown about his definition of Hesed. And I called him up, and we were throwing all these definitions, and he talks kind of strange, but he said, look, Hesed depends on what text you're in, but it all means God's momentum and divine passion towards you. How many of you know we're God's treasure? Do you know the word agape does not mean unconditional love in Greek? It does not mean that. It means something that is so beautiful and so captivates your heart, you would never put a price on it. That's a treasure. God loves you because he treasures you. Now, we all know because of the laws of redemption that we got sold into sin. But how many of you know even all of that stuff, we have missed the love of God. In fact, I'm going to tell you what I have a struggle with in our day and time is that we have not realized that this grace is a dance. And one of the things that we have not understood is this grace, this salvation is not something that you sign a card and join a church. This is a grace in which you dance with the Father. And what has happened in our generation is that more and more we are being plucked out of Babylon. And now while we're out of Babylon, there are so many people who want to do church or do ministry. But we've got to come to understand this is all about identity. And when you get a double portion of grace, you're no longer serving God because you think that's what you got to perform. You're serving God because of the joy that's inside your heart. And there's a verse in Hebrews that says you will be held accountable if you do ministry in joy. Boy, that's going to be a judgment for some people. Because I used to think, listen, if I'm miserable, I'm obeying God. Because that's what Pentecostal people told me. And every time I get to having fun. And so I called everything I do a hobby. Now I get to run around and do my hobby. But there are certain instances in the Septuagint that this word hesed, and it's in 1 Peter, where this word is actually the word doxa, which is God's judgment, view, and opinion. And from this word, in this cluster of words, you have the Greek word elios. Now, this is a word that is translated in many places as the word mercy. Now, what I did not get until recently, because the law of victims' rights, when I talked to Stephen about the law of victims' rights, the judge is not the one who makes restitution, right? There is the one that is innocent and the one that is guilty. Most Hebrew words have the root of what is innocent in it. Even the word faith has a sense of innocence. We don't understand biblical innocence because we've been so butchered by religion. So when you understand innocence, innocence is God's view of you. It's his covenant. Oh, I'm trying my best to be innocent before God. No, that's old covenant. And I tried that. Been there, done that, failed. But when you look at this in the Hebraic thought, then you have one that is guilty, and you went to the victim, and it wasn't the judge that demanded the restitution. The restitution was in the victim. That's unlocked to me what Karl Barth taught in church dogmatics. How can the judge of all become the ruler of all because he become the victim? That unlocks theology. Then there's the guy by the name of Paul Tillich. Well, there's another scholar, and he's really controversial, called Rudolf Bultmann. And I don't read a lot of Rudolf Bultmann, but there was a lexicon that had his definition of Elios. And so, I mention names, and people on the internet will search him. I can't believe you mentioned him. Well, I didn't read all their works. I read what the lexicon said. Okay, so Elios, he made a statement that was really powerful. He said, this word was translated as this word, but how many of y'all know we are coming into the full understanding of God's love? Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. We haven't experienced it all. We're there, but not there. But he said in certain cases, there was this phrase here, in certain cases, where we would experience the compassion of God that get us to here. Well, that was my link between these two, was compassion. And the only way you can have compassion is when you start understanding the body ministry. And so I'm beginning to realize in all of this that we've understood God's love to a degree. We've understood grace as a revolution. But what's different about mercy? What's different about mercy is it is a creative expression in which no longer trying to be church, you are the church. And I got news for you. It's not happening in the four walls. In fact, the grace revolution that's happening in the church and the love revolution that's happening in the church, which is the dance, is so that people can come forward and start being that expression, being that creativity. And I'm going to tell you, there are two things in this prophetic hour, and that's creativity and chaos. When I was at the Passover meeting, I came across, Dr. James Bergman mentioned the word covenant. Most people in the church world don't even know what the word covenant means. Go ask most people what the word covenant means. They don't have a clue. They think it's their vow to God. So Bergman brought that out. Rob Corey talked about fractals. And I started gathering this information. I started studying these things out. And what happened is there began to be an impartation of a dimension to me. And one of those things was Stephen connected me to a man named Carl Armstrong. And we wrote a book called Bible Acrostics. It's back there. Carl sent a bunch of them up. I'll be doing some presentations on it. What's acrostic? It's in Psalms 119 where the Hebrew alphabet is in there. Now here's the thing that blows my mind. How can you have seminaries and colleges eliminate Hebrew and yet you have a Hebrew alphabet that's in acrostics in most of the Old Testament? Well, I began to study these things and I realized that most people, there's a huge difference between an idea, a metaphor, and a concept. What is the idea? The idea is what is God speaking to you right now. Has God ever said something to you, and even though you love it, your brain starts compartmentalizing? It's like a file. No, sorry, Bob, we ain't doing that. You did this back in 17. Have you ever had those moments in which it doesn't seem like God's will, and 2 weeks later, it's a go? And you just really confused. I've been waiting on this thing for 7 years, fall flat on my face. Now you're ready. Well, what is that? It's a dance. Salvation is a dance. It's a relationship. And let me tell you something. Science and religion will never come together. I'll say it again. Science and religion, as in religion we've heard about, will never come together. But true spirituality, true Hebrew, true Greek will always line up with science. In fact, they're just now finding what they have known in ancient Hebrew for years. And may I submit to you that God's about to reach people that we could have never reached before, because he's about to blow the scientific mind off of people, because he's going to start bringing the sons of God out of the woodworks and beginning to prophesy to those worlds. Even Stephen talking about this college. I believe that these things that are being taught in these conferences are about to rock the academic world. It's time our scholars get knocked off of their thrones. It's time that we understand the shaking is not just within the four walls of a church, but this chaos is everywhere, and people are needing the full expressions of God. Even if it comes from someone who drives a trash truck. I have been studying these things my whole life. Parables. I have really understood the unlocking of parables. Because for generations, parables were looked at through 5 views. Number one, the first view is that it's all allegory. Origen did that. They want to make that all the parables are allegories. Well, scholars have been fighting that one for years. Then the second one is that we know the parables, you have to know something about the culture in which they wrote, right? You know, I've read people that servants in the Bible, and they think they're butlers. But then you have the other parables, which always try to put something off here. Y'all know what I'm talking about. All the parables are rapture and eschatology. You ain't getting nothing now. That's what they told me. This is all this parable is about to come. I got tired of waiting on then. But then there is an understanding that all parables are Hebrew poetry. All parables are Hebrew poetry. If you don't understand the Old Testament, you won't unlock the parables. And then the third is the difference in Hebrew and Greek thought. Well, I began to study and I began to research Dr. Kenneth Bailey, and he did a thesis on all 5 of those, and he said the number one problem with parables is 3 things. Number one, that we don't understand ancient Hebrew and the poetry of it, which was the acrostics, which was the parallelism, where they'd say 2 things and say the same thing. It's all in Proverbs, all in Psalms. Then the other thing we didn't understand was culture. We had people that visit the Holy Land and 2 weeks later have a revelation. When you deal with the people who live over there, their culture, you know, they don't have cell phones and drive around and do all this. You know, I've had a culture shock because half of India moved into my apartment complex. And I'm telling you, them people were up all night long. And I walk outside, you know, I'm headed to my trash truck. First thing in the morning I get out, and I hit close on lines. I said, man, I got a dryer in the way. What? Everybody's got worship. What is this, man? You know, culture shock. Dallas is a culture shock, especially if you're raised in Arkansas. But that's another one. But the other thing, which is so beautiful, is the Oriental versions of the Gospels. They're written in Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew. The stuff we could never get our hands on, we're suddenly getting our hands on. And we're finding out, just as the church lied to us about Russia, the church lied to us about Jews, the church lied to us about this, now we're finding the ancient Aramaic, what is now known as Islam, and what happened there years ago before terrorism and all this. And it is mind-blowing what it is opening up in the original languages, because we realize that Jesus taught theology in the parables. They're the greatest theology there is. And Paul taught both metaphor and concepts. And we read these things and say, well, Jesus said this and Paul said this. No. And then when you really understand this, understanding these cultures and begin to read, you realize the law was not something that you did once or twice. It was something that was so ingrained in a lifestyle, you didn't even have to talk about it. And when I began to realize this and study and search these things out, the parables opened up to me because I'm reading Hebrew poetry. I'm not reading about two people running around. I'm reading the beauty of Hebrew poetry, which half of the Old Testament is about. It was well, brother, that was used in the Old Testament, and they're quoting that. No, listen, parallelism isn't quoting an exact verse. It's quoting Hebrew thought. And it creates what I call a cluster. And so I started reading this, and then it opened up the acrostics, which I searched the entire Amazon, internet. The only thing I could find in the acrostics was Billinger and something about the book of Esther, how the name of God is in the book of Esther. I could only find the same old files regurgitated. I said, how in the world can something so powerful as Hebrew acrostics be so much and you can't find any books on it? And I did not come to this revelation. Carl Armstrong did. He called me about it. I said, man, I can't find nothing. And what I did find was people that was high up in the Roman Catholic Church who started messing with Proverbs and the wisdom in Proverbs, and they kicked him out. I don't know, maybe there's acrostics in the Vatican. I don't know. But anyways, as I was studying this stuff, it began to make me understand. No wonder people look at us like, man, no wonder scientists have looked at us like we're crazy. Because most people have only a surface reading of the text. But when you dig down in the depths of it, you find out what I am finding out, that I am standing in the middle of the greatest move of God in my life. And because I'm so concerned about my stuff, I'm so concerned about me, I'm missing the global plan and will of God for this planet. I go to half-price books. We went one here. And I went and I collected these books. And what I do is when I'm studying something, I just take and create me a stack. My lovely wife loves my stacks. Let me tell you, if it wasn't for my wife, there would be no lexicons. Because I just write stuff and throw it in a box. She just says, hey, type all that out. So she puts all this together, man. I just keep doing my Greek and Hebrew and writing like this. And she goes, well, type that out, please. So I start working with this stuff. Do you know, people have asked me how come I know Hebrew. They said, do you have any connection to Jerusalem? I said, I was not born in Jerusalem. But my wife was raised there. She was raised in Jerusalem, Arkansas. We actually went there. I didn't believe her. We took a picture of the poles. I said, look at that. Jerusalem, Arkansas. Okay. There you go. Another hillbilly coming through. There you go. My father was a car collector. Y'all like old muscle cars? Yeah. My dad, that was my dad's favorite. My dad would get up on a Saturday morning, drive down country, and he used to long haul 18-wheeler. He drove all over the United States. We'd be driving down country roads. I said, Dad, what are we looking for? Cars. I said, where? And he's looking for old barns. He's looking he'd find old cars that had been sitting there, had no miles on, been sitting in a barn. And I said, you are crazy. We'd drive all day long, sometimes not find any. As soon as he'd find them, he would buy them, restore them, drive it a little bit. Sometimes he'd let me drive them, and he'd sell them. And he loved rare stuff. And I thought, you are crazy. My stepdad was also a man that dealt with Ford racing. He dealt with Ford race cars. People brought drag racers, dirt trackers, everything to our house. I mean, Mustangs, he always hopped them up, did all these old school tricks to them. And I thought, what is wrong with y'all? And then I get over, and I'm driving down the road, and I see a half-price books, and I go crazy. And I go in there, and I'm upside down. People look at, what is he looking for? I said, I don't know, but I ain't found it yet. But here's the beauty of it. We are hunting for that treasure. But there's something greater than any book, and that's connecting with you. Because I find the treasure in earthen vessels. That Greek word is where we get the English word theoros, which means there's not enough words to describe the treasure that you are. So I'm looking for the treasure. I can get more words talking to you than I could from any other book, even though some of y'all make me go look for books, like Richard. I remember this book one time, and then I go looking for it. But there's something happening to all of us as we unlock these different treasures that has been, for the most part, unknown to the biblical world. What happens to academics? What happens when we start seeing these things on a grand scale and people start looking for a God that doesn't threaten them in order to serve him? They're looking for that God. They're searching up and down the internet. And yet there is still a sense that we're trying to, and I'll speak for me so I won't get you. But I'm trying to keep it together sometimes when God's got a global plan, and if he's got to make me uncomfortable and I got to go through a little chaos, it's worth it. Because I'm starting to see something that's beyond me and beyond anything happening, where a world is beginning to happen in the area of Hebrew. I was here at Passover. I bought some books by Tom Horn. I took them home and I put them in cellophane. I found a book by a guy named Rob Skiba, and I looked in the back of the book, and every book that I had bought at half price for the last 3 months, which he's in Texas, he's in the Dallas area, was the books that I had already bought. And I said, man, there's a movement going on all around me, and I don't even know it. Worse than that, he lives in the city. I pick up trash in. And there's people with Hebrew all over their cars, and I'm upside down. Alif, Yod, I'm reading it. The guy said, what's wrong with you people that ride with me? You know, why am I telling you this? Because there's a great move of God that is bigger than we could ever imagine, that we're on the threshold of. But understand this, we still cannot do it in our own strength. We still can't by our vow move into, we're still going to need the new covenant and the reality of it. And that has been the biggest issue, because people are still in that old covenant mentality. And when you find the people of new covenant, they will no longer do not by might nor by power, but by the double portion of his grace. And listen, that double portion of grace isn't for you to get stuff done. It's for a global plan that's bigger than any of us. And when I begin to see these things and I search these things, you know, like I said, this started out as a hobby. I see God's doctrine, his glory. You know, in the Hebrew, it's kabod or kavod. It's the weightiness of his goodness. But when you get into the Greek, it's the idea of God's judgment, his view, and his opinion. Why? Because when you get into the weightiness of his glory, it's not an anointing that just affects you mentally. It's an effect the way you think. And I'm telling you, I'm glad for an anointing that changed the way I think, because I grew up in a generation that God did signs. He did miracles. He had people, I've seen teeth grow in. I've seen it all. But I did not know how to change my heart, and I still spent hours trying to get it right, and no matter what I did, I failed, and that complete and utter fail drove me to the new covenant. So my ministry has been nothing but dynamite and chaos. Dynamite and chaos. There was a door at the churches I was in Russellville. It was called the church y'all leave. When you start asking questions you wasn't supposed to, they just point. So I started studying Greek because I always wanted to do Greek. My heroes did Greek. And I'd come in and I'd say, hey, what about this thing? You think really evil takes God by surprise? You think we'll all fly away? And I did Greek for years, but nobody cared. Then I got in some of these meetings. That's when I met Steve in 2007. I felt real vulnerable doing Greek first time. But I thought, I might as well. But in Hebrew, man, when Carl called me to write this book, I said, I got a lot of stuff to finalize, man. I got to do in 2 weeks what I've done in 16 years in Greek, man. And I was driving down the road, and I said, Father, reveal to me the secrets of your Hebrew, the secrets of your fire, the secrets of the double portion of grace. I got tired of trying to figure it out. I said, Father, open it all up. Because every Hebrew scholar is like a chef. They have their own signature blend. And it's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to hear their journey, how they got there. That's what I said to him a while ago, Kevin. I said, how'd you get here? Well, how did this all begin? But listen, in the midst of this, it's one thing to have those ingredients and have that. But man, when you put that thing under the fire, man, it's like Texas brisket. You're thinking, man, I don't know what kind of marinade they use, but I want to know. Maybe I don't want to know, but this sure is good. Listen, you are standing at the threshold, and even your chaos is the secrets of your pattern. The things you've been going through that you're trying to get God to take you out of is the very cycles of time that reveal the greatest strengths of who you are. Because what you're trying to do is God to take you out of it, and God's saying, learn to dance with your chaos. Listen, science has tried to put the same. Listen, religion, I was in a box in religion. I was in a box in science years ago. I was in the box of metaphysics. I was in the box of word of faith. And then every time I would just change terminology. But there come a day when God said, I have a covenant. I have a vow. Watch this. And God took all of these crazy things that seemed like they went 100 different directions and turned that chaos into a perfect pattern. And then all of a sudden, I didn't really try to learn Hebrew. I just blew up one day. Just everything in me, I just started searching. I went down to the library and I started buying this book and buying this book. And I read everything I could find. I had this little pickup and I drove it, and they made fun of me at work, said I could go in the fast lane because it looked like it was just put a doll's head on top of it. I mean, when you would drive the car, I was just searching for him, and they said, what are you looking for? I said, I don't know. I was like my father's, my dad and stepdad. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know it when I find it. Oh, isn't that true? Every one of you, you don't know what you're looking for, but the day you hear it, there's a ring and a sound in here. And I'm just telling you tonight to follow that sound. Follow that sound. It isn't anything I say or anybody says, but man, I'm telling you, when you start following that sound, you'll be driving down, somebody ding me. That's time to quit, isn't it? You're going along, and all of a sudden, there is this moment, sudden, that's hillbilly. In the midst of this thing, you realize I have connected with that there is no way to define it. And I know what it's like to research and dig and study. And now my mind is getting blown because resources that I have dreamed for are just falling into place. And before, that would have been a distraction. This would have been a distraction. But I am so in love with the Father and his love for me. And I am so consumed up in this global plan that I don't have time to build stuff anymore. I don't try, and it happens, whatever it's happened. I know that for many of you in this room, these conferences is not another teaching. It's not another time to get excited. It's a dimensional impartation in which you will dig and study and search for the rest of your life. If somebody listens to me, my greatest desire is not that you get all the answers, but that you start digging and searching like never before to find the very thing God's revealing to you. When I was watching Kevin over in all of his books, I was just so excited. I wanted to throw a whole bunch on top of it. But I was just watching him because that is our greatest desire. We're not here to get you some kind of teaching. We're here to impart a desire that makes you walk out a complete journey. And this journey has been beautiful, but it's about to speed up. What has taken you years will be done in days. Yeah, but I've heard all this before. So have I. But there's a difference now. I don't know. I can't put words on what the difference is, but I can tell you this. I know now what it's like to listen to Ron Oja, go home and take notes and try to figure it out, or to step into a dimension and I go, oh, that's what he's talking about. I'm there. Listen, I pray, Father, for a dimensional impartation right now from these speakers and what they have in their hearts and their minds, not in words, but it will be transfused by the breath of God, the ruach, right into their beings, and they'll start walking it out right now. An impartation of what this conference is. An impartation for Duluth right now in the name of Jesus. And from those that are screening right now, that resources will begin to fall into their hands and they'll begin to find the things they're looking for. And we will march on. We will rise up. We will resurrect. We will come forth. And we shall all awaken and rise up and no longer be the sleeping church. In Jesus' name. I pray for the fire of God to fall upon your studies, and the things that has put you to sleep will now keep you up all night, and you'll have supernatural rest, that you will begin to find these things. You will no longer be stuck. You will no longer be looking for patterns and be frustrated, but you will start not only seeing them, you will begin to feel on the inside of you that you're right smack dab in the middle of the will of God. Now, how can I preach that? How can I prophesy that? Because it's not me. It's his new covenant vow. And listen, there are some people, I'm going to be honest with you, they call me up all the time. Mark, why ain't things happen? And I know where they're at. I know they're in a season. But I tell you, I'm looking into some of y'all, and you think you're still in that season. I had a tire go flat that I thought went flat today. And I'm trying not to be distracted. I said, I don't care if it goes flat. I'm going to do what God called me to do. And finally, I went down the road, pulled up to a driveway. I said, can I have air? And God supernaturally filled that tire. It's fine. But you see, there's been so much chaos that your flesh will automatically illustrate a chaos. I got this when you were speaking, Diane, that your flesh will create a chaos to counterfeit the one God's doing. And so if you ain't careful, instead of resting in grace in the double portion, you're chasing chaoses that is all in the works of your flesh instead of understanding the chaos. Because when it's God doing it, you sit back and observe that Father is putting this thing together. Y'all know the difference when there's a chaos that's moving you to a dimension, and then there's chaos that just distracts you. And I submit to you that if you will look for the pattern, you'll no longer be distracted. And listen, if you're going to lay aside every weight, the greatest distraction to all of this is when we stop and go, well, I could do something different with myself. This ain't about you. But yet there is a willingness. I'm going to be honest with you. I moved beyond the realm of obedience years ago. I'm in the realm of willingness. Because God used to ask me in prophetic, before I ever did Greek and Hebrew, Mark, will you do this? I said, yes, Lord, I am obedient. He said, will you be willing? If you don't know the reality of the no covenant, you'll never have a willing heart. Because you will serve God because you think you're threatened, not because of a promise. I'll say that again. If you really understand the reality of the new covenant, you will serve God because of his love set on you and his promises, and never by the threaten or the threat. There's a fear. I don't know, how am I doing on time? Oh, hey, I got the 10. Look at that. She said 100. I saw her. Diane seen it. No, I want to share this story. No, I'm done. And I'm going to do a more formal presentation tomorrow. Y'all can laugh now. You ain't got it. But anyways, when I came to the meeting here at Passover, it opened so much. I was studying fractals. I was studying Tom Horn. I was studying Ross Skiba. I was studying all these guys. And I was just, oh, my God, it's Nephilim and all this stuff, And, there's a point where you're sitting there going, how did I get over here? But anyways. It's kind of like a movie. Anyways, I was sitting there studying this, and I had a meeting to go in Alabama, and I spoke on time. And when I got there, I sat down on the throne. Now, Ron Oja, this is just for him. And I look up, and there's Hebrew books in a bookcase by the toilet. I said, Lord, I'm being released. This is Ron Oja's ministry right here. Look at this Hebrew. And so I went in and I asked him some Hebrew questions, and he said, well, that's why I wanted to come. He had some books by John Livingston and a few Hebrew scholars. So, okay. And so that morning, some lady was testing me. I don't know what she said. And God started showing me the Hebrew Greek words for creation and the difference in them. And, man, that is a huge difference. Go read Stephen's stuff. There's a lot of difference in the Hebrew view of creation. It is an enormous study because you have people with a Strong's who still think in Greek thought and don't understand God's understanding of Hebraic creation. It's a massive study. I'm right in the middle of it. So when I was studying this, God starts speaking to me. He said, those Greek words are describing Hebrew thought. And so I wrote some stuff down. Well, I got up, and right in the afternoon, they ate a bunch of Alabama fried chicken and vittles, okay? So nobody wanted to get a bunch of technicals. So they said, will you do me a favor, have fun in Hebrew? So I am, but halfway through, God hits me with this anointing, and I talked about the two different Hebrew, the two Greek words for new and renew, and how they link to the Hebrew word for fresh oil. You know, God doesn't do anything new and renew like we think. God's new and renew is on his global plan, not your individual thing. But it includes that. So anyways, God pours me out like a drink coffin. I get up, I'm driving down the road. I drive for a living, and I go around this car. It's a double wide stripe, and there's a motorcycle. I don't see the other motorcycle. I almost have a wreck. I get to Birmingham, Alabama. 2 people had car trouble, hit the brakes, and went straight to the deal. I mean, I nearly hit both of them. And I'm driving down the road, and my wife looks at me. Thank God for wives that know their husbands. She goes, you're asleep. I said, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. Yeah, no, I'm not. She said, you're asleep. So we pull over to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She goes in to check on a hotel room. I'm out. You know, I'm drooling. She's trying to get me to wake up. I go in there. I remember sitting in the chair. I don't even get in the bed. I sleep for almost 12 hours straight. And I'm going, oh, my gosh. Well, I'm not leaving in the middle of the night, so I sleep some more. Get up. Kathy says, hey, why don't you go down to that Barnes & Noble? You like that Barnes & Noble. Why don't you go down there? I said, no, I got to get home. So I get in the car. I'm driving. I'm starting to fall asleep again. What's the point? When you step out of what God's doing, this arise and waken, and you start being in disobedient, you're going to start going back to sleep. And I'm sitting there. I said, I got things to do. I got to get home. So I'm pushing. We ended up stopping somewhere in Ruston, Louisiana. There's a little Bible bookstore, poor lady. She had a bunch of rare Hebrew books in there, and I went in there and went nuts. And then I come back in there, and she goes, I got some more. She knew she seen me. I said, you remember me? Yeah, they're right there. Get them. So I start getting Hebrew. And so I go home, and this little fear comes in. What happens? You get on the road, and you get too tired. Little fear, not that big, you know. So I go to Georgia. A few months later, I'm coming back. That little fear. All of a sudden, I get about to the same place, and she looks at me and goes, you're stopping in Tuscaloosa. I've arranged that we're getting a hotel there. You're not driving like you did last time. Go down there, and guess what? I want to relax. And God's sitting there going, go to Barnes & Noble. So she looks at it. Apparently she hears God just like I do. She goes, when are you going to Barnes & Noble? Went down there, picked up a Hebrew book, and it was the exact Hebrew that I was looking for, and that book was there the first time. What am I saying? If we don't rise up in obedience and do the things that God's called us to do and find the research he's called us to do, we will go back to sleep. So then I'm on the way home, and this has been the worst summer I've ever had in Texas. I got dehydrated 3 times. I got sicker than I ever had been. And the day that I got sick, that morning, God said, they asked me to speak at a funeral, which was more like a celebration. God gave me words. She looked at me, she said, we got to cancel. I said, God spoke to me. I'm not doing this again. I drove completely sick all the way to the deal. God healed, spoke at the deal, and God released to me supernatural insights in Hebrew, and I drove home completely, absolutely healed in a matter of seconds. Why? Because I have decided that I'm going to arise and awake and do the thing that God's called me to do and not sit there and be comfortable because whatever he's doing is connected to a bigger body. You know what? When that happened, at the same time, Carl starts calling me, and we're working on this book. Everything is supernaturally connected. And you know what I found? When I got done with that and it was all over, I realized that I was in the middle of a move of God in Dallas, right under my nose, had to do with Hebrew, didn't even realize it. And I said, God, don't, and I'm praying this for me. I ain't putting this on you. Lord, bring on the chaos. Let me dance with it. But don't let me be so comfortable that I miss the greatest move of God that has ever lived. And with that, I'll close. I know I was a little lengthy on Friday night, but I love it hanging out with you. When I get up here, I feel like I'm with family. And I don't normally feel that. Okay? I've been to there. Hey, I've been where they helped me find that door. You say you and your books can go. I told them one time, you know, the Bible in Hebraic says that God is both male and female, and Aramaic says he's an it. And they told me my male, female, and my it can get up and go. So, but, listen, you're a family here. You're a family, and you get to hang out and see the greatest thing. And listen, you know what's so neat? When I got to this conference, I said, man, I got all this stuff about chaos. That, you know, it's not going to go that. And then everybody gets up and starts talking about being broken and chaos and crumbling and all this. I thought, oh, my gosh, I'm in the right place. Now, the formal presentation will be in the morning. So with that, I give it back to Stephen.